what Jesse Waters says. We'll finally get to him.
I know you love Gavin's policies. What are your thoughts about this wonderful governor's?
You're very good at math, so see if you can do this in your head. You probably can. If you're making $20 an hour to work at a fast food restaurant, right? Is that six figures? Are you making
No.
40 grand.
50 is just to exit and add a few zeros.
Yeah. Okay, so
40K a year.
Okay,
full time.
40K a year.
Yeah.
So, and then if your husband.
All right. It is 40K, and I'm going to tell you how they got that number. It's easy. The average person, full-time employee, is considered 2,000 hours a year. That's 40 hours a week for 50 weeks, 2 weeks off. Right? Out of a 52-week year. So 2,000 times $20 is $40,000. Okay? So that's what it is. That's not very much money.
And that's before you've had anything come out for taxes, health insurance, any contributions you have to make to the health insurance or to retirement plans, whatever. So that's 40,000 before anything comes out.
And I looked this up.
So we're probably talking like you're maybe walking home with 30,000, and that's without me using any sort of a calculator. But like you're probably realistically not actually making it home with
33.
By the time all the things come out.
After taxes, about 33. Yeah, it's going to be.
Right, but if you're like, gee, I better put something into this, like, you know, if there is a 401k, I better put something into this thing, right? Or they take extra out for your health insurance, or you know what I mean? There's just other stuff.
Well, let me throw you this.
33 still sucks, but it might not even be as high as 33 is what I'm saying.
Yeah, depending on what your other expenses are. But let me tell you this. So I looked this up too. Average cost for a one-bedroom apartment in Los Angeles County is $2,700 a month. That's $32,400 a year. Out of $33,000, it's barely enough to afford an apartment. No food, no anything else.
You can't keep any lights on. You can't get to your job, and you definitely can't feed yourself, let alone see a dentist or anything. But you might maybe be able to pull off having an apartment.
Yeah. So they're already in shit water, and they haven't even thought about it.
Husband or wife is also there. You're making $100,000 as a family.
Sure.
Both working at McDonald's?
So now he's saying if a couple, you and your wife, or spouse, let's just say spouse, because you could have a husband or a wife, doesn't matter. But let's say you and a couple are making 40 each at McDonald's. Well, that's 100,000. No, that's 80.
And it's before taxes. Okay, let's also get off the idea. Can't wait to see the comments on this, but let's get off the idea that somebody who's on paper bringing home $100,000 is like rolling in the dough here, because actually by the time all the crap gets taken out of their check, they're walking home with nowhere near that. No. And at a high cost of living area like what we're talking about now, even then they are not rolling in the dough. So let's get off the idea that that's suddenly huge. Not to mention he obviously can't do math. They're not making 100.
No, and I'm just being honest here with people. Like, I lived in Honolulu, and Honolulu's not as expensive as LA County, but it's expensive, right? But I got to tell you right now, 100,000 in Honolulu is like 70 in Portland.
Similar in New York. 100,000 in New York, you know, is like, I don't know, in Portland probably more like 60 or something. I mean, it's everything is so outrageously expensive.
Yeah, it
here.
Doesn't. Yeah, they're idiots. They're not.
So they're trying to say this. You know, they're saying this in a way to try to fool people into thinking that these are gargantuous amounts of money. Plus, they couldn't do math. But aside from they can't do math, trying to paint it like it's this huge amount of money. But they're talking about these high cost of living areas where it's really, it's not the same as $100,000 in South Dakota would be. You know,
God, no. God.
No.
And then
if it's 100,000 in Wyoming, you're living like a freaking king. 100,000, you know, in one of the major cities in California or New York or whatever, it's not.
Yeah, but even then, if you figure if you're a couple doing that after tax, like you said, it's probably only about 66, and then you got to piss away 33 of that just to pay for your rent for a one-bedroom apartment for two people. So now,
right.
you've only got $33,000 to split, and that's going to cover all your other costs of living, food, expenses, utilities,
And
transit.
What if it's not just an adult couple? What if there's a child?
Now you're really
Or
fucked.
more than one?
Yeah, now you're really scraping by. So it's just barely enough for a couple to survive. That's what we're talking about here. But they can't fucking do this math. I mean, it's so stupid.
80
Yes.
grand.
That is okay. That's crazy. That is crazy, because that job really doesn't require much. So it's inflating the entire, labor sector
And the Happy Meal.
and the Happy Meal,
Unhappy, very unhappy.
which I'm very unhappy about. But I believe Gavin Newsom will be president one day. The man is smooth. He's
All right. So we'll skip over that part. It's so stupid. First off, that job doesn't require much. I'm sorry. That guy couldn't do a full 8-hour shift at McDonald's. A fucking spoiled millionaire couldn't handle it. He'd be screaming at customers. He'd piss everybody off. He'd be gone.
Not to mention, if he had to do any of the stuff in the kitchen, he would not be able to hack that. That's extremely fast paced, and there's a lot of details in it. There's a lot you physically have to do very quickly in a repetitive way that if he's never done it before, I'm sorry, he's not going to be able to just walk in and do,
Yeah. That's why when you're 16 and you start at McDonald's, they don't start you in the kitchen. I worked at McDonald's.
'Cause it's
when I
hard.
was 16. You know where I got started? I got started at the drive-through window because it's the easiest one to start you at.
Right.
You know, it's also the one that nobody wants because you get yelled at a lot in the drive-through window. But no, I mean, it's so stupid to say these people aren't. I mean, they're working 40 hours a week. They deserve to be able to live. That's the argument I'd make. But there are other better economic arguments. We can
No. Remember, the conservative way is this stuff for us, this other stuff for everybody else.
Right.
So the only people that really deserve to live are people who make money.
Right. Well,
Isn't that how their platform goes? I mean, that's what I've been getting from it. Have I missed a point?
No,
I don't know.
it's more like people who inherit money. But let's look at this real quick.
Oh, right. Okay,
Right.
got it.
It's who your parents are. Anyway, let's look at this. So this is Investopedia. Just what are the pros and cons of raising the minimum wage? So we'll just look at the arguments, right? So they go through this, and we'll skip down to where they go. So pros. The primary argument advanced in favor of raising minimum wage is that higher earnings would improve the overall standard of living for minimum wage workers. This is what we've been talking about. By providing them with more appropriate income level to handle the cost of living increases. A 2022 study by the CBO analyzed the macroeconomic impact of the standard minimum wage reaching $15 an hour in 2027. The data reported that 10.9 million workers would be directly affected, while an additional 9.2 would potentially be affected. The total directly or potentially affected workers by 2032 would surpass 23 million. So it would improve 23 million people's lives if we did a national. I mean, there's 60 million something. What is it in the workforce? Is 161 million people. So 23 million. That's 14% of the working population whose lives would be better over a $15 an hour minimum wage, which is a lot smaller. Intangible benefits that can translate into tangible benefits for both companies and employees is improved employee morale resulting from higher wages. Business owners frequently note the challenge of providing sufficient encouragement to spur workers to put maximum effort into their job duties, then that this is a particularly problematic with low-wage workers who feel that their job efforts aren't keeping them out of poverty. Increasing employee morale could easily translate into more tangible benefits, such as increased employee retention and reduced hiring and training costs. Employees who are more inclined to stay with a company longer could benefit for greater advancement and overall reduction in job-related relocation expenses. So what he was talking about before, about people starting at the bottom and working their way up, the reason nobody does it anymore is because there's such a huge wage gap and an income gap that why would I stay at a company that pays me shit? I'd always be looking for a new job.
Oh, but you see, people are supposed to be loyal even when they're being forced to eat dog shit.
Yeah. You just eat dog shit for 30 years.
You
And
can just eat dog shit and love it and be loyal.
yeah, all of you work.
I mean,
and you'll all
But
be
the thing that
CEO.
makes me crazy is the people who expect that loyalty would never give that kind of loyalty if that was what they were getting.
No,
Ever.
none of these guys. None of
Ever.
these guys would ever fucking do that.
But
So
they expect it. So again, once again, this is just going back to prove the point that here's one standard for one group of people and another for another. The expectation, the standards, they are absolutely not the same with these people.
No.
They're not the same.
No.
And they prove it time and time again across the board in every freaking subject we can come up with.
Oh no, absolutely. It's absolutely. It's a hierarchy. It's more for me, less for thee. That's their whole philosophy. See, the last thing is consumer spending would go up because there'd be more money. People would be making more money. So cons. Let's look at the con arguments. They didn't even address any of the con arguments, which I think is weird. Because there are some con arguments you could make. I don't think they're good, but you can make them. Among the disadvantages of an increasing minimum wage is the probable consequence of business increasing prices. And that typically happens. But people are making more money, so it's not really that much of a stretch. Right? Opponents argue that raising minimum wage would likely result in wages and salaries increasing across the board, thereby substantially increasing operating expense. It's true. For companies that would then increase the prices of products and services to cover their increased labor costs. Sure. But
However, can we also pause and offer the idea that I might be more productive if I don't have to have 3 jobs and I could just have my one?
right, exactly.
Right? So those costs, I'm not trying to pretend they don't exist because, I mean, these things are legitimate to consider. But when we also think about how productive our labor might be, that's also worth considering.
But here's the thing that they're not. So that's the argument, right? The stupidity of the argument is, okay, if I have to pay people more money, right, that means it dips into my profit, so I have to, because that's my money, so I have to raise prices to maintain my level of profit, right? And that's a bad thing. And it does affect inflation and whatnot, potentially. You could say that. But people are making more money. And now, if every business is having to do this, now all these people are making more money. Now I have all these customers that I couldn't afford me before. Now they can. So you've just opened up more markets. Right? Which goes back to his stupid nightclub analogy. If you only want the real wealthy people in your nightclub. Well, yeah, but if there's more wealthy people, you're filling up the nightclub every night. You know what I'm saying? It's just stupid. So this is just a complaint, but it's that's the argument, but there's a downside to that argument. Increasing prices means a general increase of cost of living. And they could have negative advantage. You could potentially argue that. Another projected problem resulting from an increased minimum wage is that other potential job losses. Many economists and business executives have pointed out that labor is a major cost of doing business, argue that businesses will be forced to cut jobs to maintain profitability. This argument that, okay, costs have gone up, so now I'm going to fire people. This has actually been proven wrong, and I'll show you guys in a minute. And the reason is this, and I'll tell you this as an employee. So let's say I have 20 employees at a restaurant, and the cost has gone up, so I lay off 5 of them. Well, what's going to happen? They're going to go file for unemployment, right? So if you guys don't know how that works, they go file for unemployment. Unemployment's going to ask them, why'd you get fired? They're going to say, well, we got laid off to cut costs, essentially. Then unemployment is going to take that filing. They're going to notify me, the former employer. And they're going to say, you need to justify why you fired this person. If I have a good reason, like, oh, yeah, I gave them, 2 verbal, 1 written, 1 verbal, 2 written warnings, they were screwing up, blah, blah, blah. Then, if I have a good justification for that it was them that caused the problem and not something I did or chose to do, then what will happen is unemployment will side with me, the employer, if I'm justified, and then they don't get unemployment. Now, if I laid them off, there's not a justification for firing. That's a choice I made. So unemployment's going to side with them, which means I now have to pay unemployment to pay for their unemployment. Unemployment doesn't come out of taxes. It comes from the employer, the former employer. So I fired 5 people, but now I've got to pay unemployment for 5 people. So I just took a swift kick in the ass. I've got less people working, I'm less productive, but I'm still paying them. I'm paying them less, but I'm still paying them.
Well, I was going to say, arguably, you are paying them less, but the amount of productivity you're losing, you would have to evaluate whether paying them that much less and being that much less productive
And
is
profitable.
still, or like, is it still profitable, or did you just rearrange things, but it's didn't do you any good?
Right. So typically,
You know?
business owners, there's such a huge disincentive for just laying off people like that. Business owners don't typically do it because it just ends up screwing yourself. So, I mean, it's a bad argument. These, like I said, they're all kind of bad arguments against it. Let's see, the same 2020 mentioned the Congressional Budget Office also analyzed how higher wages may result in the elimination of roles. By 2027, the CBO estimated that 1.6 million jobs would be lost. By 2032, this would increase to 1.9 million jobs. Now, this is an estimation on the assumption that employers fire people. But we don't know. So this is all these, noticed all the articles that said these are the benefits of increasing minimum wage are all backed by actual numbers and results. All the arguments against it are speculation of what might happen. So one is a boogeyman. It may exist, it may not. You wouldn't know until you tried. But all the benefits we can show are tangible, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of this comes down to how much did you raise minimum wage and how quickly. Because if you do it too fast, then these things are definitely going to be a problem. If you do it gradually, not such a big deal. And let me show you this. So, Yahoo Finance has this article. What happened when these places raised minimum wage to 15? So this is back in 2020. So federal minimum wage is $7.25. We'll go through it, but I want to get down to, they're going to talk about what is minimum wage, blah, blah, blah. Potential downsides. Okay. Let's see. States that have passed, they list them all here. Cities that passed it, they list them all here. And then major companies that pay $15 an hour. And there's a lot of them. JP Morgan, Aetna, Wells Fargo, Disney, Ben & Jerry's, Costco, Amazon. A lot of, because they figured that if we pay them better, they stay longer and we get better results.
Yeah, that's honestly really important too, because even for these positions that are considered more entry level, or you could train anybody, there is a cost associated with onboarding and training new employees, regardless of position type. And if you constantly have them turning over, you really are spending a lot of money getting people just out of the gate to be able to do your work.
Yeah.
And that's not great either.
If
you can pay a little more and keep them, you could avoid all those training costs.
Yeah, it's what we call in business. There's profit generating activities and non-profit generating activities. And ultimately you want all your activities to be profit generating, but that's not the way it works. You want to minimize your costs for non-profit generating if you can. And like Lacey said, if I'm spending all my time training these people, they're not making me money.
They have to get to a certain knowledge and skill level before they really become profit generating. There's a certain amount of time, initially an employee, when you're training them at the very beginning, is just costing you money, right? Because they're not generating anything. And then you hit a little span of time, which might vary according to what the job is, but where they're maybe a little bit in the neutral zone, right? They're not like really costing you, but they're not really like creating you profit yet. They have to get up to a certain knowledge and skill level in whatever the position is before they create a profit. If your wages are crap, you might be running the risk of by the time they get to the knowledge and skill level to really be creating you money, they don't want to be there anymore and they're taking something else because you're not paying them enough. You want them to stay there in that sweet spot as long as possible.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So that's the point. Yeah, you nailed it. So how minimum wage increases affected major cities? Okay, most of the places that currently have a $15 minimum wage haven't had it implemented for long enough to see the true effects. So this is just the little bit we know for the 2 years from 2018 to 2020. So the 2018 study by UC Berkeley's Center on Wage and Employment Dynamics examined what happened in 6 major cities that increased their minimum wage to more than $10 by the end of 2016. So it's a 2-year study. Chicago, Oakland, San Francisco, San Jose, Seattle, and Washington, D.C. So what they did. So let's look at a couple of these. New York made minimum wage increase. So in 2016, New York passed a law that would raise minimum wage in New York city to 15 an hour by the end of 2018. So it was gradual. It built up over a couple of years. So let's go to the results. What happened? Restaurants reportedly reduced employee hours, eliminated jobs. Okay. In response to New York City's December 2018 minimum wage increase, some restaurant owners said they had to cut employee hours and raise prices. So this is coming from the restaurant owners who are saying this. CBS News reported, okay, John Bluestein, who operates 6 New York City restaurants that employ between 50 and 110 people, said he no longer uses hosts and hostesses during less busy times and began staggering employee start times. He also increased menu prices. And he says, as a result of the minimum wage, it will cost me more to dine out. He told CBS News, it's not great for labor, it's not great for the people who invest in our own restaurants, and it's not great for the public. So the same argument that they were talking about from the Wall Street Journal article and whatnot, about these guys, the business owners are saying, I had to cut employees, I had to raise prices, it's just bad for everybody. That was their argument. So we'll get into that. So, and his views aren't unfounded. A 2019 survey conducted by the New York Hospitality Alliance found that in response to raising labor costs, 76.5% of full-service restaurant owners reduced employee hours by 36.3%, and then 36.3% eliminated jobs. So this is self-reporting from the restaurant owners. They're saying this is what we had to do. Okay? What happened? Restaurant workers saw major wage increases. Okay, despite the New York City Hospitality Alliance report, the New School Center for New York City Affairs said it did not see massive job loss in the restaurant industry, which has the highest proportion of workers affected by the minimum wage of any major industry. The New York State minimum wage rose in phases from $7.25 in 2013 to $13.15 during 2018. During this period, New York City has seen strong economic expansion of the restaurant industry, outpacing national growth in employment, annual wages, and the number of both limited and full-service restaurant establishments. Compared to 12 large cities around the country that did not have any minimum wage increase from 2013 to 2018, New York City's restaurants generally have seen stronger job growth. So the self-reporting, it's bad from the owners because they had to pay more. Right? But the actual studies that looked at the economy and what happened saw, well, no, there's now even more restaurants and more restaurant jobs and more growth. More profit. So, no, that didn't happen. What he reported didn't happen. They do have this. The unemployment rate in New York City was 4.0 in December 2018 and increased to 4.1 in January and 4.2 in February and 4.3 in March. It's unclear whether this is a direct effect of the wage increase, though. So, we don't necessarily know that that's what happened. And we can go through all these, but it's all the same shit over and over. Basically, we didn't see any real damage. In fact, we saw increase in wages. We saw, of course, increase in wages. But we saw more profitability, more job growth, better for the economy. It was basically what's good for the goose is good for the gander kind of thing. So this whole thing, there's no analysis to any of this. All I had to do was Google, well, what are the real effects? Does this actually work? Because if it doesn't, then we wouldn't be sitting here saying, oh, this is a good idea. We'd be saying, no, it's bad for these reasons. But that's the difference between our analysis and theirs, which is, theirs is like, well, these guys bitched about it. And we think it's stupid and it's not fair that McDonald's workers are making $40,000 a year. They should be making less. That was it. That was their whole analysis. That was the whole argument. Our argument showing you this is the actual result when we've done it.
And besides, just going to throw this out there, if you want capitalism to work, people have to have enough money to be able to spend.
Yeah, you got to have jobs. So yeah, all stupid stuff. So anyway, that's the business bros that know what they're talking about show. And it's always stupid.